If you were to steel man the case against God or the existence of God,
Yeah.
you find the most convincing argument is there's evil in the world,
Yeah.
therefore there's no God.
There's too much of it. Yeah, if I were to steel man that argument, I do what Stephen Fry does. I would do what Dostoevsky's Ivan does. I would do exactly that. I would say there's just too much. And then if you want to keep pressing it, animal suffering. So we talk about human suffering, but the suffering of animals over the eons and so on. Isn't there just too much suffering to be reconciled with an infinitely good God? And that's, again, Thomas Aquinas. I've just used his very steel-manned argument.
You mentioned that, again, on Reddit, somebody asked who your favorite communicator of atheist ideas was, and you mentioned Christopher Hitchens.
Yeah.
Are there other ideas for atheism that you find particularly challenging?
Well, that's the one, is the problem of evil. The other objection in Aquinas, which has a lot of contemporary resonance, is can't we just explain everything through natural causes? Why would you have to invoke a cause beyond the causes in the world? So as I'm trying to explain, let's say for Aquinas, motion, causality, finality, can I just do that with natural causes? Wouldn't that suffice to explain it? So I get, like, when naturalists are speaking, or people that are pure materialists, they'll just say, no, that's perfectly adequate. A scientific account of reality is utterly adequate to our experience. So I would steel man that and say, well, show me why we need something more. And to do that, you got to get out of Plato's cave, it seems to me. Because my objection to naturalism is it's staying within the realm of the immediately empirically observable and making the mistake of saying that's all there is to being. That's all there is that needs to be explained. And long before we get to religion, just stay with Plato. The first step out of the cave, if you combine it now with the parable of the line, is mathematical objects. And I'm with those, the many people that would say mathematics is an experience of the immaterial. I've stepped out of a merely empirical, physical, naturalistic world the minute I understand a pure number or a pure equation or a pure mathematical relationship, which would obtain in any possible world, which are not tied to space and time. That's a first step out of the cave. And then that leads to the more metaphysical reflections. For example, on the nature of being. I mean, so I could talk about this thing as a physical object, and I can analyze it at all kinds of levels and follow all the scientists, up and down through this thing. And fine. But I'm still in Plato's cave. I'm still looking at the flickering images on the wall. But when I step out of that into the mathematical realm, I have entered a different realm of being, it seems to me.
Do you think it's possible for the cave to expand so large that it encompasses the whole world? Meaning, is it possible that we're just clueless right now in terms of scientifically speaking, with most of the world we haven't figured out yet? But do you think it's possible through science to know God, to look outside the world? So it's fundamentally the limit of the empirical scientific method is that we can't know some of these very big questions.
No, I love I'm not a scientist, and I was never all that good at science. I was more a humanities guy. But I love and respect the sciences, but I hate scientism. And scientism is rampant today, with especially young people. The reduction of all knowledge to the scientific form of knowledge. And I'm a vehement opponent of that. There are dimensions of being that are not capturable through a scientific method of mere observation, hypothesis formation, experimentation, etc. As great as that is, as wonderful as that is, but it's still, I think, within Plato's cave. And that's not to say it's not real. It's just at a relatively low level of reality. You step out of Plato's cave when you go into pure mathematics. That's why, that article, I just came across it recently and discovered this whole literature around it, is Eugene Wigner's article, 1960, called The Unreasonable Applicability of Mathematics to the Physical Sciences. I think that's the title of it.
Or effectiveness or something like that.
Yeah. But what's so cool is that, he's not a religious man. He was a kind of a secular Jew, but yet he uses the word miracle like 8 times in that article. And because he just is so impressed by the fact that high complex mathematics describes so accurately the physical world and can be used to create things and to manipulate. And why should that be true? There's something very weirdly mysterious about that relationship, And I would say it's because you stepped into a higher order of being, which is inclusive of a lower level of being. That's the Platonic approach, is that as you move, now I'm going to a different metaphor, you move to higher levels, they're inclusive of the lower levels.
Yeah, there's some magic there that seems to, at least in our current understanding of science, to be not quite capturable. Even consciousness, the idea of consciousness.
Can I ask you, where do you think the laws of nature come from? So, I mean, sort of the Wigner question, where does the deep mathematical structure of things come from? How do you explain that?
The mathematical structure, or the fact that the structure is somehow pleasing and beautiful, because those are different. Those are two different.
No, but do the first one first. I'm just curious. Where do you think it comes from?
I tend to believe, even in terms of physics, we don't really know what's going on. There's so much more to be discovered. We're walking around in the dark trying to figure out little puzzles here and there, and we're patting ourselves on the back on how many puzzles we've discovered so far. Even Gödel's incompleteness theorem. What are the limits of mathematics, axiomatic systems? I don't know what is the purpose of mathematics. What is the power of mathematics? Is it just a useful tool to study the world around us, or is it something deeper that we're just discovering? All I know from my emotional perspective, now I am an engineer, I'm a robotics AI person. From an emotional perspective, I just find the whole thing beautiful.
Yeah, no, but that's really cool to me. That's a very interesting clue. See, one of the arguments for God is based on the intelligibility of the world. It's like Wigner, it's a very peculiar fact, it seems to me, that the world is so radically intelligible. Why should that be true? Why should it be the case that being has this intelligible structure to it? So it corresponds to an inquiring mind. So Aquinas can say that the intelligible in act is the intellect in act, meaning there's some deep correspondence between this and that. And I'm with Wigner. That's, I think, really weird and unreasonable and strange. Now, my answer is because the creator of the universe is a great mind and has stamped the world with intelligibility. In the beginning was the Word, right? And the Word was with God, and all things came to be through the Word. We shouldn't picture that so much. It's gesturing in this very powerful direction. There's an intelligence that has imbued the world with intelligibility. And we discovered that,
There's something about the simplicity of the way the world works that's where the beauty comes from. And yes, there's something profound to the mechanism, whatever that is. God that brought that to be.
That thought it into being. That the world has been... When the Bible says that God said, let there be light, and there was light. God said. Well, again, we don't literalize the poetry, but it's very rich that God spoke the world into being. So that means it's been imbued with intelligibility from the beginning. They say that the condition for the possibility of the Western physical sciences was a basically Christian idea, namely that the world is not God. Therefore, I can analyze it, experiment upon it. I don't divinize it. Mm-hmm. I don't have a mystical relationship to the world. It's not God. But secondly, that it's absolutely in every nook and cranny intelligible. And those two ideas are correlated to the idea of creation. So it's been created. It's not God. It's other than God. But yet it's touched in every dimension by God's mind. And when those two things are in place, the sciences get underway. I don't worship the world anymore, but I'm also utterly confident I can come to know it. And those are theological ideas.
Well, we live in this world, so we can solve quite a lot of problems of this world by making the assumption that this world is fully understandable. Mm-hmm. And we don't need to worry about what's outside the world in some sense in order to build bridges and rockets and computers and all that kind of stuff. It's only when we get to the questions that are deeper about why we're here at all, what does it mean to be good, all those kinds of things, do we need to reach outside of this world.
Well, can I introduce another one? So I talked about mathematics. I think it's stepping out of the cave. It's stepping out of just the purely empirical, world. But the very fact that we use a word like universe to me is very interesting. Even if you say multiple universes, to me that it's like, well, they're whatever the whole is, the totality. Universum, turn toward the one. Why would we call it that? Why wouldn't we just call it an aggregate? It's just an aggregate of stuff. It's an aggregate of all, but we call it a universe. And my answer from the classical metaphysical tradition is it's the intuition of being. So I immediately experience things here, the color and shape, and I can measure them. But when I've really stepped out of the cave and I've now engaged beyond mathematics even, I'm now into metaphysical reflection. I'm interested not just in this thing as an object and how it's colored and shaped and what its atoms and quarks and all that are. That's fine. But I'm interested now in, what does it mean to say this thing is real? So what makes this a being? And then what are the characteristics of being? So now from Aristotle to Heidegger, this question of the nature of being. But see, I would say we call it a universe because it's turned toward the one of being. It's this intuition that whatever, from quarks to galaxies to whatever, give me a billion other universes, it would still be existence, right? It's turned toward the one, that being unites our experience. And so now I'm at the metaphysical level of analysis. I've taken another step out of the cave. In Plato's language, I'm at the formal level now, beyond mathematics, the level of forms. And the formal is inclusive of the mathematical, which is inclusive of the physical. And I think that's Eugene Wigner, is that the mathematical includes the physical. It is metaphysically prior to it.
But here we are sitting in the physical trying to make sense of why the unreasonable effectiveness of the thing that's beyond, which is the mathematics.
My answer is God. And I don't know a better answer. And as I read Wigner, he wasn't ready to say that. But I think the language is gesturing. I was reading someone recently, some very well-known physicist, who said his answer to Wigner's question is that whoever is responsible for the universe must be a mathematician. And I thought, yeah, that's right.